Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight I've got some absolutely wild Reddit stories for you. Alright, let's jump into the first story. So, I need to get this off my chest because I'm genuinely questioning whether I'm the problem here or if my entire family has lost their minds. Last month, my younger sister got married. Let me set the scene. She's always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the favorite who got away with everything while I was held to impossible standards. But I'm an adult now. I've made peace with it. Or so I thought. The wedding was supposed to be this elegant, sophisticated affair. My sister had been planning it for 2 years. 2 full years of Pinterest boards, vendor meetings, dress fittings, and honestly, making it everyone else's problem. My mom was involved in every single decision, basically co-planning the whole thing. I was asked to be a bridesmaid, which I accepted because, family. The dress she picked was fine, nothing special, but it was expensive. $250 for a dress I'd wear once. Whatever, it's her day. Here's where things started getting weird. About 3 months before the wedding, my sister called me in tears. Apparently, her venue had double booked, and they were canceling on her. She was devastated. My mom was on the other line, equally hysterical. They asked if I could help find a new venue since I work in event planning. I spent 2 weeks of my free time calling every venue within 50 miles. I negotiated prices, checked availability, sent my sister detailed breakdowns of each option. I finally found a beautiful garden venue that had a last-minute cancellation. It was actually nicer than her original choice and slightly cheaper. My sister loved it. My mom loved it. Everyone was happy. I didn't ask for thanks, but I definitely didn't expect what came next. A month before the wedding, my sister called me again. She needed to cut down the bridal party because the new venue had a smaller capacity, and she wanted to invite more guests. She was removing me as a bridesmaid. I'd still be invited as a regular guest, but I'd already bought the dress, taken time off work for the bachelorette party, and spent hundreds on her bridal shower. I was hurt, obviously, but I tried to be understanding. I said, okay, that's fine, I get it. But then she asked if I'd still be willing to help coordinate things on the day of since I have event planning experience. Essentially, she wanted me to work her wedding for free after demoting me from the bridal party. I said no, politely but firmly. I told her I'd love to attend as a guest and celebrate with her, but I wasn't going to work the event. She got upset. My mom got involved, telling me I was being selfish and unsupportive. They said family helps family, and after everything they'd done for me, I owed them this. I stood my ground. The wedding day arrived. I showed up in a nice dress, ready to just enjoy the ceremony and reception. But the moment I walked in, I could tell something was wrong. The decorations were half finished. The seating chart was a mess. The caterers looked confused. Apparently my sister had been relying on a friend to coordinate everything, and that friend had completely dropped the ball. The ceremony itself was fine, but the reception was a disaster. Dinner was served an hour late. They ran out of wine before the toasts. The DJ played the wrong song for their first dance. My sister spent most of the night visibly stressed and trying to fix things instead of enjoying her own wedding. Here's where I might be the problem. I didn't help. I watched the chaos unfold, and I didn't lift a finger. Several family members came up to me asking if I could help sort things out since I'm a professional. I just smiled and said I was there as a guest, not a coordinator. My mom cornered me during the reception, furious. She said I had ruined my sister's wedding by refusing to help, that I was being vindictive and petty, that I should be ashamed of myself. I told her that I had offered to help months ago as a bridesmaid, but they made it clear my help wasn't needed when they kicked me out of the bridal party. After the wedding, my sister sent me a long text message saying I was a selfish, terrible person, and that our relationship was over. She said I deliberately sabotaged her wedding by not stepping in, when I could clearly see things were falling apart. My mom has been blowing up my phone, saying I need to apologize. But here's my perspective. I found her a new venue when her original one fell through. I spent hours helping her, Then she kicked me out of the bridal party and expected me to work her wedding for free. When I declined, she didn't make other proper arrangements. How is her poor planning my fault? My dad is staying neutral, but quietly told me he understands my side. My brother says I should have just helped to keep the peace. My friends are split, some saying I was justified, others saying I should have been the bigger person. I feel guilty, but I also feel like I'm not the one who should be apologizing. I set a boundary and stuck to it. The fact that my sister's wedding turned into a mess isn't my responsibility. So I'm asking, did I go too far? Should I have just helped despite everything? Or was I right to maintain my boundary? Let's move on to the next story. I work in a corporate office, the kind with gray cubicles, fluorescent lighting, and a break room that always smells vaguely like burnt popcorn. It's soul-crushing in the way that only middle management can be, but the pay is decent and my coworkers are mostly tolerable. Except for Derek. Derek is the guy who microwaves fish in the break room. Derek is the guy who takes hour-long lunches and leaves at 5 on the dot, while the rest of us are drowning in deadlines. Derek is the guy who somehow gets credit for team projects he barely contributed to. But I could live with all of that. What I could not live with was Derek stealing my coffee cup. Let me explain. I'm particular about my morning routine. I have a specific travel mug, a really nice one my girlfriend got me for my birthday. It's insulated, keeps coffee hot for hours, has a leak-proof lid, and honestly, it's just a great cup. I love that thing. Every morning, I'd make my coffee, pour it into my mug, bring it to work, and set it on my desk. One Tuesday morning, I went to a meeting and came back to find my mug gone. I checked the break room, the conference room, everywhere. Nothing. I figured maybe I left it at home, so I used a disposable cup the rest of the day. The next morning, I specifically remember bringing my mug to work. I set it on my desk, went to the bathroom, came back, and it was gone again. This happened 4 times in 2 weeks. My mug kept disappearing. Then one morning, I walked past Derek's desk, and there it was. My mug, sitting right there on his desk, still warm, clearly in use. I stopped and stared at it. Derek looked up at me. "Nice mug," I said. "Thanks. I just got it," he replied, completely straight-faced. I knew it was mine. It had a tiny scratch on the bottom that I'd recognize anywhere. But what was I supposed to do? Accuse him of stealing my coffee cup? It felt insane. So I let it go. But Derek had made a mistake. He'd started a war he couldn't possibly win. Here's what you need to know about me. I'm patient, I'm creative, and when someone wrongs me, I don't get mad. I get even. Phase 1 was simple. I bought a new mug, identical to my old one. I started bringing it to work every day. Derek must have noticed because he started eyeing it, probably planning his next theft. But I never left it unattended. I took it everywhere. Meetings, bathroom breaks, lunch. That mug stayed with me. Meanwhile, I started observing Derek's routine. He arrived at 8:15 every morning, grabbed coffee from the break room at 8:30, and spent the first 20 minutes of his day browsing sports news instead of working. Clockwork. Phase 2 began on a Monday. I came in early before Derek, and I made a special pot of coffee in the break room. Decaf. But I didn't label it. I also hid the regular coffee so the only option was my decaf pot. Derek, creature of habit, poured himself a large cup. He had no idea. For those who don't know, caffeine withdrawal is brutal. Headaches, fatigue, irritability. Derek was a 3 cups a day guy, minimum. By 10 a.m., he looked miserable. By noon, he was snapping at everyone. I did this for 3 days straight. Every morning, I'd come in early, make a full pot of decaf, and hide the regular stuff. Derek was falling apart. He complained constantly about feeling tired and unfocused. He left early twice that week because of headaches, but I wasn't done. Phase 3 required some investment. I went online and bought a dozen cheap, identical mugs that looked exactly like the one Derek had stolen from me. I brought them to the office over the course of a week and started leaving them everywhere. One in the break room, one in the conference room, one near the printer. Just casually placed around the office, Derek noticed. I could see him getting confused, probably wondering if I had multiple identical mugs, or if he was losing his mind. Then I escalated. I recruited my coworker Jenny, who thought this whole thing was hilarious. She started leaving mugs around too. Different colors, different sizes, but always within Derek's line of sight. Our office started looking like a mug convention. Derek, already suffering from mystery caffeine withdrawal, began to look genuinely paranoid. He kept glancing at all these mugs, clearly trying to figure out what was happening. Phase 4 was the finale. I came in very early one Friday morning, before anyone else. I took all 12 of the cheap mugs I'd scattered around and placed them on Derek's desk in a perfect circle. In the center, I placed my original mug, the one he'd stolen, which I'd taken back from his desk the night before when he left early. Inside the mug, I left a note. Found your collection. Thought you might want it organized. When Derek arrived and saw his desk, he just stared. He looked around the office, but no one was there yet. He sat down, surrounded by coffee mugs, and I watched from the kitchen as he slowly pieced together that someone knew what he'd been doing. He never said a word about it. He didn't report it, didn't confront anyone. He just quietly removed all the mugs from his desk. And he never stole my coffee cup again. The best part? My coworkers started noticing the mugs appearing and disappearing, and it became this weird office mystery. People started joking about the mug ghost. Derek couldn't explain any of it without admitting he'd been stealing cups. To this day, Derek and I maintain a professional relationship. We exchange pleasantries, attend the same meetings, work on the same projects. But every morning, when I walk past his desk with my coffee mug, I see him glance at it, and I smile. Let's get into the next one. I've been married to my husband for 4 years. We have a good relationship. We communicate well. We handle conflict like adults. But there's one recurring issue that's been testing the limits of our marriage: his mother. My mother-in-law, let's call her Carol, is a force of nature. She's opinionated, boundary-challenged, and has a very specific vision of how her son's life should look, a vision that rarely includes my input. When my husband and I first started dating, Carol was polite but distant. When we got engaged, she became more involved, offering unsolicited opinions about our wedding. She didn't like my dress, didn't like the venue, didn't like that we were having a secular ceremony. We ignored most of it and had the wedding we wanted. After we got married, things escalated. Carol started dropping by our apartment unannounced. She'd let herself in if we didn't answer, claiming she just wanted to make sure we were okay. She'd rearrange our kitchen cabinets, criticize our decorating choices, and make passive-aggressive comments about my cooking. My husband, to his credit, tried to set boundaries. He asked her to call before visiting. She'd agree, then show up anyway, saying she forgot, or it was an emergency, which always turned out to be something like she was in the neighborhood and wanted to drop off Tupperware. We moved to a house last year, specifically choosing one farther from Carol's place, hoping the distance would naturally reduce these visits. It didn't work. She started inviting herself to stay overnight, saying the drive was too long to do in one day, even though it was 45 minutes. Then came the incident that broke me. 2 months ago, Carol called my husband crying. She said she was having work done on her house, major renovations that would take weeks, and she needed somewhere to stay. Could she stay with us temporarily? My husband, because he's a kind person who loves his mother, said yes, without consulting me. I came home from work to find Carol in our guest room, unpacking suitcases. Like she was moving in permanently, I pulled my husband aside and asked how long she was staying. He said 2 weeks, maybe 3, just until her renovations were done. I wasn't happy, but I agreed to make it work. 2 weeks turned into 4, then 6. The renovations, according to Carol, kept hitting unexpected delays. Every time my husband called the contractors to check on progress, they seemed confused, saying everything was on schedule. Living with Carol was a nightmare. She criticized everything I did. My cooking wasn't healthy enough. I didn't clean correctly. I worked too much and wasn't home enough for my husband. She rearranged our furniture, refolded my laundry because I did it wrong, and started planning meals without asking what we wanted to eat. The final straw came when I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She was laughing about how she'd convinced my husband to let her stay with us, how the renovations were actually finished 2 weeks ago, but she was enjoying living in our house so much she'd just been pretending they weren't done yet. I was furious. I immediately told my husband what I'd heard. He confronted his mother. She denied it at first, then admitted it, but said she didn't see the problem because family takes care of family. My husband told her she needed to leave. Carol cried, said we were kicking her out, that we didn't care about her. She called me cruel and selfish. She said I was turning her son against her. We held firm. She moved out the next day, but not before leaving a note on our kitchen counter saying she was deeply hurt and needed time to recover from this betrayal. Since then, Carol has been on a campaign to paint me as the villain. She's told extended family that I kicked her out when she had nowhere to go. She's told friends that I've alienated her from her son. She posts vague Facebook statuses about toxic daughters-in-law and ungrateful children. My husband has been supportive, but I can tell this is weighing on him. He feels guilty. His mother is playing the victim, and even though he knows she lied to us, part of him still feels like we should have been more understanding. Some family members have reached out saying we were too harsh, that Carol is lonely and just wanted to be close to her son, that I should be more accommodating. Others have quietly told me they understand and that Carol has pulled similar stunts with them. I refuse to apologize. She lied to us, manipulated her way into our home, and overstayed by weeks. The fact that she's now playing victim doesn't change that. But I'm exhausted. This has consumed so much of our mental energy. My husband and I have had more fights in the past 2 months than in our entire relationship. We're seeing a couples therapist to work through it, which is helping, but it's still a struggle. Carol wants an apology before she'll speak to us again. My husband is torn, wanting to repair the relationship with his mother, but also wanting to support me. I've told him I won't apologize for setting boundaries in my own home. So here we are. My mother-in-law isn't speaking to us. Half the family thinks I'm terrible, and I'm just trying to get my house back to feeling like a peaceful space instead of a war zone. Moving on to the next story. Okay, so this is embarrassing, but I need to share this because looking back, I cannot believe I didn't see the red flag sooner. 3 years ago, I moved to a new city for work. I didn't know anyone, had no friends, and was feeling pretty isolated. I'm not great at making friends as an adult, and after a few months of just going to work and coming home alone, I was genuinely lonely. One Saturday, I was at a coffee shop when a woman around my age struck up a conversation. She was friendly, asked about my life, seemed genuinely interested. Her name was Sarah. She invited me to a community gathering. Her group was hosting that evening. She described it as a social club for young professionals, people who wanted to make meaningful connections and support each other's personal growth. It sounded perfect. I went. The gathering was at someone's house, maybe 20 people there, all friendly and welcoming. They did icebreakers, shared food, talked about their goals and dreams. It felt like the community I'd been missing. Everyone was so positive and supportive. They talked about self-improvement, being your best self, creating the life you want. Nothing seemed weird. Sarah introduced me to the group leader, a guy named Marcus. He was charismatic, well-spoken, had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room. He talked about how the group had changed his life, how they helped each other overcome limiting beliefs and achieve their potential. I started attending their weekly meetings. They'd have workshops on goal setting, confidence building, time management. It was like a mix of self-help seminar and social club. I was making friends, feeling more confident, actually enjoying my life in this new city. About a month in, they introduced me to their personal development program. It was a series of courses you could take to unlock your true potential. The first course was $300. That felt like a lot. But everyone in the group had taken it and said it changed their life. I figured it was like paying for any class or workshop. The course was intense. Weekend-long seminars where we do group exercises, one-on-one coaching, these weird vulnerability practices where you'd share your deepest fears and insecurities with the group. It was emotionally exhausting, but also kind of exhilarating. I felt like I was breaking through personal barriers. Then came the second course, $800. I hesitated, but Marcus pulled me aside and said this was exactly the kind of limiting belief the course would help me overcome. He said investing in yourself is never a waste. Everyone in the group encouraged me. I paid. The second course was where things started feeling off. They introduced us to the teachings, this philosophical framework that Marcus had developed. It was a mix of New Age spirituality, pop psychology, and some concepts I couldn't quite follow. They talked about energy levels and how most people were operating at low frequencies. They said the group existed on a higher plane, and that's why we could see truth that others couldn't. They started asking us to recruit new members. They called it sharing the gift of the community. We were supposed to approach people in coffee shops, gyms, bookstores, anywhere, and invite them to gatherings. They said we were helping people by bringing them into the group. I started noticing other things. The group discouraged us from spending time with people outside the community. They said low-frequency people would drain our energy and pull us back down. If I mentioned hanging out with coworkers or calling old friends, someone would ask if those people were aligned with my growth. Marcus started having more control over our personal decisions. Someone in the group wanted to take a new job in another city, and Marcus convinced them to stay, saying leaving would be running from their growth. Another person wanted to go back to school, and Marcus said formal education was a trap that kept people stuck in conventional thinking. My family started expressing concern. I'd been telling them about the group, how great it was, how much I was learning. But when my mom asked specific questions about what exactly we did and what these courses taught, I realized I couldn't really explain it. The teachings were vague and constantly shifting. When I tried to describe them to my mom, they sounded like nonsense. The third course was $1,500. I didn't have that kind of money. Marcus said I could payment plan it, that this investment would pay off exponentially. He said I was on the verge of a major breakthrough, and stopping now would be wasting everything I'd already invested. That phrase, wasting everything I'd already invested, triggered something in my brain. I learned about sunk cost fallacy in college. I was literally experiencing it in real time. I started Googling the group. I found a forum where ex-members shared their experiences. The stories were all similar to mine. Isolation from outside friends and family, escalating financial commitments, charismatic leader who controlled major life decisions, vague teachings that didn't really mean anything, recruitment pressure. It was a cult. I'd accidentally joined a cult. I felt like an idiot. I'm an educated person. I consider myself reasonably intelligent. How did I not see this? But reading those forums helped me understand. Cults don't recruit people by announcing their cults. They target people who are vulnerable, lonely, searching for connection. They offer exactly what you're looking for, then slowly shift the dynamic so you don't notice you're being manipulated. I decided to leave. I stopped attending meetings. Sarah called me dozens of times. Marcus showed up at my apartment unannounced, saying he was concerned about me, that I was sabotaging my growth. Other members texted me constantly, saying they missed me, asking if I was okay. I blocked everyone. I changed my routine so I wouldn't run into them. I felt paranoid for weeks, worried they'd show up at my work or follow me. The worst part was the shame. I'd convinced 2 other people to join before I realized what it was. I reached out to them, explained what I'd learned, apologized for bringing them in. One of them thanked me and left immediately. The other one didn't believe me and is, as far as I know, still involved. I lost $1,100 and 3 months of my life. But it could have been so much worse. Some people in those forums had been involved for years, had given tens of thousands of dollars, had completely isolated themselves from everyone they knew before joining. I'm more cautious now about groups that seem too welcoming, too perfect, too focused on recruiting. I'm more aware of manipulation tactics, and I'm much more comfortable with being alone, rather than seeking connection in places that might be dangerous. If you're reading this and something about your social group, your church, your self-help program, your wellness community feels off, trust that instinct. Google them. Look for ex-member testimonials. Ask critical questions. Real communities don't isolate you from the outside world. They don't escalate financial commitments. They don't discourage you from thinking critically. I got out relatively unscathed. Not everyone does. All right, let's dive into the next story. I have a dog named Charlie. He's a 5-year-old golden retriever, the goodest boy. Absolutely perfect, except for one thing. He will eat anything offered to him by anyone. No questions asked, no loyalty whatsoever. I live in a house with a fenced backyard. Charlie goes out there throughout the day, does his thing, enjoys the sunshine, lives his best life. I feed him a strict diet because he has some food sensitivities. Certain foods mess up his stomach, and trust me, you do not want to deal with the aftermath. About 6 months ago, new neighbors moved in next door. Nice couple, probably in their 60s, retired, seem friendly enough. We did the whole wave and smile thing over the fence, exchanged pleasantries, normal neighbor stuff. Then I started noticing Charlie was gaining weight. Not a lot at first, just a little pudgy. I adjusted his food portions, figured maybe I'd been overfeeding him, but he kept getting bigger, and his stomach started getting upset more frequently. I couldn't figure it out. His diet hadn't changed. His exercise was the same, but something was clearly different. One afternoon, I happened to look out my back window and saw my neighbor, the wife, tossing something over the fence into my yard. Charlie ran over and ate it immediately. I went outside and asked what she'd given him. She smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, just some leftover chicken from lunch. He looks so hungry." I politely explained that Charlie is on a specific diet and I'd appreciate it if she didn't feed him. She apologized, said she didn't know, promised it wouldn't happen again. It happened again, multiple times a week. I'd catch her throwing food over the fence. Hot dogs, bread, leftover pasta, cheese, all things that mess with Charlie's stomach. I talked to her again. More firmly this time. I explained that these foods make him sick, that I'd appreciate her respecting my boundaries as Charlie's owner. She said she understood, but seemed a bit offended, like I was being unreasonable. The feeding continued. Charlie's stomach issues got worse. I was cleaning up after him constantly. He was lethargic and clearly not feeling well. I took him to the vet, explained the situation. The vet confirmed that someone feeding him random foods was absolutely the problem. I went next door and knocked on their door. Both neighbors answered. I explained again that they needed to stop feeding my dog. The wife got defensive, saying she was just being nice, that Charlie clearly loved the treats, that I was being controlling. Her husband chimed in, saying dogs need variety in their diet, and maybe I was being too strict. I told them I didn't care what they thought about my dog's diet, he's my dog, and they need to stop. They agreed, but with attitude. The wife said something passive-aggressive about how some people are just uptight about everything. A week later, I caught the husband feeding Charlie through the fence. I lost it. I yelled at him to stop. He yelled back that it was a free country and he could do what he wanted in his own yard. I called the police non-emergency line. The officer who came out said it was a civil matter, that I should consider building a taller fence or keeping my dog inside. Not helpful. I talked to a lawyer friend who said I could potentially sue them if Charlie got seriously sick and needed expensive vet care, but it would be hard to prove and probably not worth the hassle. So, I got creative. I started documenting everything. Every time I caught them feeding Charlie, I'd take photos or videos. I compiled a folder of evidence. Then I printed out articles about dog nutrition, the dangers of feeding dogs human food, Charlie's specific health issues. I wrote a formal letter outlining the situation, included the articles, and had it notarized. I sent it via certified mail so I'd have proof they received it. They ignored it. Charlie got really sick. He was vomiting, had diarrhea, was clearly in pain. I took him to the emergency vet at 2 a.m. $600 later, the vet confirmed he'd eaten something that had triggered a severe reaction. I sent my neighbors the vet bill with a letter demanding reimbursement. They refused, said I couldn't prove they'd caused it. Here's where I became petty. I started a neighborhood social media group. I posted about the situation, vague enough not to name them directly, but specific enough that everyone in the neighborhood would know who I was talking about. I framed it as a PSA about respecting pet owners' boundaries. Other neighbors started chiming in with their own stories. Turns out, my neighbors had been feeding multiple dogs in the neighborhood. One dog had a severe allergic reaction. Another dog had started refusing their own food because they were getting so many treats from my neighbors. The neighborhood turned on them. People started confronting them. Someone reported them to the HOA for repeatedly violating pet-related community rules. My neighbors tried to defend themselves, posting their own messages about how they were just trying to be nice, how they loved animals. But public opinion was firmly against them. The HOA sent them a formal warning. If they continued feeding other people's pets without permission, they'd be fined. It worked. They stopped. Charlie's health improved. He lost the extra weight. His stomach issues resolved. My neighbors won't speak to me now. They glare at me whenever we're outside at the same time. They've put up privacy screening on their side of the fence so they don't have to see into my yard. Honestly, I'm fine with it. I'd rather have hostile neighbors who leave my dog alone than friendly neighbors who keep making him sick. Some people have said I overreacted, that I should have just kept Charlie inside or built a better fence. But I shouldn't have to completely change my life because my neighbors can't respect basic boundaries. Charlie is healthy and happy now. That's all that matters. Let's get into the next one. I lived with a roommate for about 18 months. We met through a housing app. She seemed normal. We got along fine. Her name was Jessica. She was quiet, kept to herself mostly, paid rent on time. No red flags, until there were. About a year into living together, I started getting weird emails. Notifications about accounts I didn't recognize. A credit card application I never submitted. A shipping notification for an order I didn't place. At first, I thought it was spam or phishing attempts. I deleted them and didn't think much of it, but they kept coming. Different companies, different services, all confirming things I definitely didn't do. I checked my credit report. There were 3 hard inquiries I didn't authorize. Someone had applied for credit cards in my name. I immediately froze my credit and started the identity theft recovery process. It was a nightmare. Hours on the phone with banks, credit agencies, fraud departments, filing police reports, disputing charges. The whole thing was consuming my life. I couldn't figure out how someone got my information. I'm careful online. I don't click suspicious links. I use strong passwords. How did this happen? Then I noticed something weird. Jessica had been acting strange. She'd gotten a bunch of new clothes, had upgraded her laptop, was going out to nicer restaurants. Nothing dramatic, but noticeable for someone who'd been complaining about being broke for months. I started paying attention. One day, I came home early from work and found Jessica in my room. She claimed she was looking for her phone charger, thought maybe she'd left it in there. It was a weak excuse, but I didn't have proof of anything, so I let it go. I started locking my bedroom door. I moved all my important documents to a safe deposit box at the bank. I changed all my passwords. The fraudulent activity stopped. No new weird emails. No new unauthorized accounts. That's when I knew. It was Jessica. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed proof. I set up a small camera in my room, hidden, pointed at my desk, where I sometimes left my wallet and mail. 2 days later, I reviewed the footage. There she was. Jessica, entering my room with a key, going through my desk, photographing documents with her phone. I took the footage to the police. They were interested, but said it would be hard to prosecute without more evidence directly linking her to the fraudulent accounts. They suggested I file a civil suit. I consulted a lawyer. He said I had a case, but it would be expensive and time-consuming. He suggested I confront her first, try to get a confession or restitution without going to court. I didn't want to confront her while still living with her. So I found a new place, gave my landlord notice, and started preparing to move. The day before I moved out, I sat Jessica down. I showed her the camera footage. I told her I knew what she'd been doing, that I had a documentation of all the fraudulent accounts, and that I was giving her one chance to make this right before I pursued legal action. She denied it at first, said the footage didn't prove anything, said I was paranoid, but when I started listing specific purchases made with the fraudulent accounts, things only she would have known about because they were delivered to our apartment, she broke down. She admitted everything. She said she was drowning in student loan debt, was desperate, saw an opportunity. She said she planned to pay it all back eventually, that she never meant for it to become this big. I told her she had two options: pay me back for all the fraudulent charges, plus the money I'd spent dealing with the identity theft recovery process, or I'd pursue criminal charges. The total was over $4,000. She said she didn't have that kind of money. I said she needed to figure it out. We agreed on a payment plan. She'd pay me $500 a month until the debt was clear. She made 2 payments, then stopped responding to my messages. She moved out of our old apartment with no forwarding address. I tried to pursue it legally, but without knowing where she was, it was nearly impossible. I never got the rest of my money back. The identity theft process took over a year to fully resolve. Some of the fraudulent accounts went to collections before I could get them cleared, which temporarily tanked my credit score. I had to explain the situation to potential landlords, loan officers, everyone who ran a credit check on me. It was one of the most violating experiences of my life. This was someone I'd lived with, trusted, shared a home with, and she was systematically stealing my identity for months. I'm more careful now about roommates, background checks, references, meeting their previous landlords. I keep all my personal documents locked up. I monitor my credit religiously. But beyond the practical precautions, it changed how I trust people. I used to be pretty open, assuming people were generally good unless proven otherwise. Now I'm more guarded, which is sad, honestly. Jessica is out there somewhere, probably doing fine, maybe doing the same thing to someone else. I reported her to every relevant agency, but without a current address or contact information, there wasn't much they could do. The system isn't set up to protect victims of identity theft. The burden falls on you to prove you didn't make these charges, to spend hours fixing something you didn't break, to pay for credit monitoring and legal fees. If you have roommates, lock up your documents. Monitor your credit. Don't assume that just because someone seems trustworthy, they are. I learned that lesson the expensive way. Moving on to the next story, I met my best friend, let's call her Amy, in college. We clicked immediately. She was funny, smart, had this adventurous spirit that I loved. We were inseparable for 6 years. She was the person I called for everything: good news, bad news, random thoughts at 2 a.m. Amy had this incredible life story. She grew up in Europe, moved around a lot because her dad was a diplomat. She spoke 4 languages. She'd lived in Paris, Rome, Berlin. She had all these amazing stories about her childhood, adventures in different countries, meeting interesting people. She also had a tragic backstory. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 19, right before she started college. She had no other family. She was completely alone in the world, which is why our friendship meant so much to her. I felt honored that she'd chosen me as her family. I supported her through what I thought were anniversaries of her parents' death, helped her through moments when she said she was struggling with grief. I was there for her always. Last year, Amy got engaged. I was thrilled for her. She asked me to be her maid of honor. We started planning the wedding together. It was going to be small, she said, because she didn't have family to invite. About 2 months before the wedding, her fiancé called me. He sounded stressed. He said they were having issues with the wedding planning and he needed my help with something. He asked if I knew how to contact Amy's family. I was confused. I told him Amy didn't have family. Her parents died years ago. There was a long silence on the phone. Then he said, "What are you talking about?" "I met her parents last month." My stomach dropped. He sent me a photo. Amy, standing with an older couple, clearly her parents based on the resemblance, very much alive. I confronted Amy. She denied it at first, said her fiancé was confused. Those were friends of the family, not her actual parents. I pushed harder. She got defensive, angry, accused me of not trusting her. I did something I'm not proud of. I hired a private investigator. I needed to know the truth. The PI came back with a report that shattered everything. Amy's parents were alive and well, living in Ohio. Her dad wasn't a diplomat, he was an accountant. She didn't grow up in Europe, she grew up in suburban Cleveland. She spoke English and had taken 2 years of high school Spanish. That's it. The tragic car accident? Never happened. The international childhood? Completely fabricated. The languages, the stories, the adventures? All lies. I confronted her again, this time with evidence. She couldn't deny it anymore. She broke down crying, admitted she'd been lying about her past since college. She said she created this persona because she felt boring. She grew up in a normal, middle-class family in Ohio and felt like she had nothing interesting to say. When she got to college and met people with exciting backgrounds, she panicked and made up stories. Then she couldn't take them back without admitting she'd been lying. 6 years. 6 years of elaborate lies. 6 years of me comforting her over dead parents who were actually alive. 6 years of listening to stories about a childhood that never happened. I asked why she didn't tell her fiancé the truth. She said she tried to tell him early in their relationship but couldn't do it, and then too much time had passed. She was planning to keep up the lie forever. I was furious, not just about the lies, but about how she'd used her fake tragedy to manipulate sympathy from everyone around her. How many times had people given her special treatment, emotional support, financial help because they thought she was an orphan? I told her I couldn't be her friend anymore. She begged me to understand, said the lies had spiraled out of control, that she never meant to hurt anyone. She said the friendship was real, even if her backstory wasn't. But how could it be real? I didn't know who she actually was. The person I'd been friends with for 6 years didn't exist. The real Amy, from Ohio, with living parents and a normal childhood, was a stranger to me. I stepped down as maid of honor. I told her fiancé everything. He was devastated. He called off the wedding. Last I heard, he broke up with her completely. Amy reached out multiple times, trying to explain, to apologize, to salvage something. I blocked her. Several mutual friends took her side, saying I was being too harsh, that everyone lies sometimes, that I should forgive her. But this wasn't a little lie. This was a systematic, elaborate deception maintained over years. This was lying about dead parents. This was manipulating people's sympathy and trust for half a decade. Some people said maybe she had a psychological disorder. Maybe she needed help rather than judgment. Maybe that's true. But I can't be the person to help someone who lied to me for 6 years straight. I can't maintain a friendship with someone I fundamentally don't trust. The weirdest part is grieving the friendship. I'm mourning someone who never existed. The Amy I thought I knew, with her interesting past and tragic story, was fictional. The real Amy is someone I never got to meet because she was too busy pretending to be someone else. I've had a hard time trusting people since then. I find myself questioning everything, wondering if other people in my life are lying about fundamental things. It's made me paranoid and suspicious in ways I hate. I don't know what the moral of this story is. Don't lie? Obviously, be yourself. Sure. But also, maybe if you start a lie, come clean before it snowballs into a decade-long deception that destroys all your relationships. Amy, if you're somehow hearing this, I hope you told your parents the truth. They deserve to know their daughter has been pretending they're dead. Let's dive into the next one. I work in a large corporate office, about 200 people on my floor. We have communal bathrooms, normal office setup, nothing fancy. And like every office bathroom, there are unspoken rules. Flush. Wash your hands. Don't make a mess. Basic human decency stuff. Except someone on our floor wasn't following those rules. For months, there was a phantom bathroom destroyer. This person would use the facilities and leave absolute carnage behind. Unflushed toilets, paper towels everywhere, mysterious puddles. Once, and I'm not joking, someone had somehow gotten toilet paper on the ceiling. Everyone complained about it. We'd gather around the break room coffee machine and speculate about who it could be. Theories ranged from someone with a medical condition to an angry janitor to a visiting executive who doesn't respect us peasants. The office manager sent out multiple passive-aggressive emails about bathroom etiquette. Nothing changed. The phantom struck at random times in different bathrooms across the floor. No pattern, no way to predict. I became obsessed with solving this mystery. I don't know why. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I just really hate injustice, even bathroom-related injustice. But I decided I was going to figure out who was doing this. I started documenting incidents. I'd note the time, the bathroom, the severity of the destruction. I created a spreadsheet. Yes, I made a spreadsheet to track office bathroom crimes. I'm aware this makes me sound unhinged. After 2 weeks of documentation, I noticed something. The incidents only happened between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m., and between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., specific windows. I started paying attention to who used the bathroom during those times. I'd find excuses to be in the hallway, pretending to make copies or refill my water bottle, and I'd note who went into the bathroom right before an incident. This went on for another week. I narrowed it down to 5 suspects. One of them had to be the phantom. Then I had a breakthrough. I was in the bathroom washing my hands when I heard someone enter a stall. I recognized the shoes under the door, these very distinctive, expensive loafers that one of my suspects wore. I waited, pretending to fix my hair in the mirror. When he came out, he walked straight past the sinks and out the door. Didn't wash his hands. Already a red flag. But also, he'd been in there for less than 2 minutes, which seemed suspicious. I gave it 30 seconds, then checked the stall he'd used. Chaos. Unflushed. Paper everywhere. Water on the floor. I'd found him. The phantom was Martin from accounting. Mid-40s, always wearing expensive suits, acted like he was too important for mundane office activities like cleaning up after himself. Now I had a dilemma. What do I do with this information? I couldn't exactly go to HR and say, "Hey, I've been stalking bathroom habits and I've identified the culprit." That would make me sound like the problem. I decided on a subtle approach. I printed out a small sign and laminated it. It said, "Please flush, wash your hands, and clean up after yourself. We know who you are." I put it inside the stall Martin frequented. The next day, the sign was gone, and the bathroom was destroyed again. Martin had escalated, so I escalated too. I printed multiple signs and put them in every stall on the floor. Bathroom etiquette is not optional. Violators will be identified and reported. Martin started using the bathroom on a different floor. I followed the pattern. Sure enough, within days, people from the floor below started complaining about a bathroom phantom. I'd driven him to a new hunting ground. I went to that floor and put up signs there too. Now, Martin had to choose. Either clean up after himself or travel to yet another floor. This became a weird game. Martin would switch floors. I'd follow with signs. I put up notes in every bathroom in the building. I became the bathroom vigilante, the anonymous protector of office hygiene. The office manager noticed the signs and sent out an email asking who was putting them up. I stayed silent. I was a bathroom vigilante working in the shadows. Then something unexpected happened. Other people started adding their own signs. Funny ones, encouraging ones, increasingly aggressive ones. The bathroom sign movement had taken on a life of its own. Someone made a sign that said, "Your mother would be disappointed in you." Someone else put up, "Flush like someone you love has to use this bathroom next because they do." Martin, presumably realizing the entire office was now hyper-aware of bathroom behavior, had no choice but to comply. The incident stopped, I never told anyone it was me who started the vigilante bathroom sign campaign. I let everyone think it was an organic grassroots movement. About 6 months later, Martin left the company for a different job. On his last day, someone gave him a gag gift, a framed sign that said, "Please flush." He laughed uncomfortably. Everyone else thought it was a random joke. I knew better. The bathroom etiquette in our office has been impeccable ever since. People flush, wash their hands, clean up after themselves. All it took was one anonymous vigilante with too much time and a laminator. Was it a weird obsession? Absolutely. Was it a weird way to spend my energy? Probably. But you know what? Our office bathrooms are now the cleanest I've ever seen in a corporate environment. Sometimes justice requires someone willing to do what others won't, even if that means documenting bathroom crimes and waging a sign-based psychological warfare campaign. You're welcome, former coworkers. Let's get into the next story. I'm the older sibling by 4 years. Growing up, my parents always emphasized the importance of education. They started college funds for both me and my younger sister when we were born. The deal was simple. They'd contribute regularly, and when we turned 18, the money was ours for college expenses. My fund had about $40,000 by the time I graduated high school. Not enough to cover everything, but a significant head start. I went to a state school, worked part-time, took out some loans, and managed to graduate with minimal debt thanks to that fund. My sister was different. She was never academically focused. She struggled in school, didn't care about grades, talked constantly about how college was a scam and she wasn't going. My parents tried to encourage her, but she was adamant she'd figure out her own path. Fine, her choice. Her college fund just sat there, accumulating interest, waiting for if she ever changed her mind. When my sister turned 19, she announced she was moving to California to pursue modeling. She'd been doing some local modeling gigs, nothing major, but she was convinced she was going to make it big. My parents were skeptical, but supportive. They said if that's what she wanted to try, she should go for it, but she needed to have a backup plan. She moved to LA. Within 6 months, it was clear the modeling thing wasn't working out. She was broke, living with 3 roommates in a tiny apartment, working retail to pay rent. She called my parents, constantly asking for money. My parents helped when they could, but they weren't wealthy. They'd already stretched themselves supporting 2 kids through their teens. They couldn't just fund her LA lifestyle indefinitely. Then my sister called me. She'd never been particularly close to me, so the call was surprising. She said she needed to talk about something important. Could we meet up? I was visiting home for the holidays, so I agreed. We met for coffee. She looked stressed, thinner than I remembered, clearly struggling. She told me she was having a hard time in LA, that modeling was tougher than she thought, that she was considering coming home. Then she asked me a question that made my blood run cold. Could I give her some of my college fund money? I was confused. I told her I'd already used my college fund for college. That was what it was for. She said no. She meant, could I give her some of her college fund money? Because apparently, my parents had made me the custodian of her fund when I turned 21. It was in my name, held in trust for her. This was news to me. I vaguely remembered my parents mentioning something about it years ago, but I'd honestly forgotten. I'd never looked at the account, never thought about it. As far as I was concerned, it was her money, not mine. I told her I'd have to talk to our parents about accessing it, that I didn't even know the details of the account. She said she'd already asked them, and they'd said no. They told her the money was for education only, and since she wasn't pursuing education, she couldn't have it. She wanted me to give it to her anyway, behind our parents' backs. I said absolutely not. That money was supposed to be for her future, for college, if she ever decided to go, or for starting a business, or for something substantial, not to fund a struggling modeling career in LA. She got angry. She said it was her money, that I had no right to keep it from her, that I was being controlling just like our parents. I explained that technically, it wasn't her money yet. It was held in trust, with specific conditions. Our parents had set it up that way for a reason. She accused me of being jealous of her, of wanting to keep her down, of never supporting her dreams. She said I was a stuck-up, judgmental person who looked down on her for not going to college. I tried to stay calm. I told her I loved her, wanted her to succeed, but giving her that money to continue a path that clearly wasn't working wasn't helping her. If anything, it would enable her to keep struggling instead of making a real change. She left furious. She called our parents, told them I was refusing to give her her own money. She painted me as the villain. My parents backed me up. They explained to her, again, that the fund was for education or approved major life investments, not for daily living expenses in LA. My sister stopped speaking to me. She stopped speaking to our parents too. We'd hear updates through extended family. She was still in LA, still struggling, increasingly bitter. Then, about a year later, I got a notification from the bank. Someone had tried to access the account. The attempt was flagged as potentially fraudulent. I called the bank. They said someone had called claiming to be me, trying to transfer the full amount to a different account. The security questions were answered incorrectly, so they froze the account and notified me. I knew immediately it was my sister. I called my parents. We filed a report with the bank. They investigated and confirmed the call had come from my sister's phone number. She'd attempted to steal $45,000 by impersonating me. My parents were devastated. I was more angry than hurt. She'd crossed a line from being irresponsible to being criminal. We confronted her. She denied it at first, then admitted it, but said she was desperate, that we'd driven her to it by refusing to help her. She said if we'd just given her the money when she asked, she wouldn't have had to resort to this. The mental gymnastics were incredible. She tried to commit fraud and was blaming us for forcing her hand. My parents gave her an ultimatum: come home, get a stable job, start making better decisions, or they were done supporting her in any way. They weren't going to press charges for the attempted fraud, but they also weren't going to enable her anymore. She chose to stay in LA. She cut off contact completely. That was 3 years ago. I haven't spoken to her since. My parents have minimal contact, just occasional texts. Last they heard, she'd given up on modeling and was working as a bartender. The college fund is still sitting there, now worth about $50,000 with interest. I'm still the custodian. My parents and I have discussed what to do with it. The original plan was to hold it until she was 30, then release it to her regardless. But honestly, I don't know if that's the right move anymore. Someone who tried to steal money through fraud probably isn't going to use it responsibly. It's a sad situation. I miss my sister, or at least who I thought she was before all this. But she made choices that have consequences. I can't force her to make better decisions, and I definitely can't reward her for trying to steal from family. The money sits there, a reminder of what could have been if she just made different choices. Let's get into the next one. I worked for a mid-sized tech company for about 3 years. It was a decent job, good pay, normal corporate environment. The company prided itself on its charitable initiatives. They had this big campaign every year where they'd raise money for various causes, match employee donations, organize volunteer events. It was a major part of their brand identity. I worked in the finance department, specifically in accounts payable. My job was pretty straightforward: process invoices, manage vendor relationships, make sure bills got paid on time. About a year ago, I was processing a batch of invoices when I noticed something odd. There was a recurring payment to an organization called Future Foundation for $50,000 monthly, $600,000 a year. I'd never heard of this organization. I checked our charitable giving records to see what cause they supported. Nothing. I searched our internal databases. No information. I asked my manager about it. She said it was one of our partner charities, that it had been set up before she started, and not to worry about it. Just process the payment. That answer felt wrong. $600,000 a year to an organization nobody could explain. I couldn't let it go. I did some digging. I looked up Future Foundation online. They had a basic website, very vague language about supporting communities and making a difference. No specific programs, no financial statements, no real information about what they actually did. I checked the charity registration databases. Future Foundation was registered as a nonprofit, but their tax filings showed almost no actual charitable work. The money was going to administrative costs and program development. Translation, it was going nowhere useful. I dug deeper. I looked at who founded Future Foundation. The name on the registration documents was familiar. It took me a minute to place it, but then I realized it was our CEO's brother-in-law. My stomach sank. This was bad. I pulled all the financial records I could access. Future Foundation had been receiving payments from our company for 5 years, $3 million total, and based on their tax filings, almost none of that money was going to actual charitable work. I didn't know what to do. If I was right, this was fraud. Our company was funneling money to a fake charity controlled by someone related to the CEO, then writing it off as charitable giving and using it for good PR. But I was just a mid-level employee in finance. Who was I supposed to report this to? My manager had already blown me off. Going to HR felt pointless since they reported to the CEO. Going to the CEO was obviously not an option. I decided to go to our company's ethics hotline, an anonymous reporting system for exactly this kind of thing. I submitted a detailed report with all the documentation I'd found. Weeks went by. Nothing happened. The payments to Future Foundation continued. I started to think my report had been buried. Then one morning, I came into work, and my computer access was disabled. I was called into a meeting with HR and my manager. They said they were restructuring the department, and my position was being eliminated. I was being let go, effective immediately. They offered me a severance package, but only if I signed an NDA and a non-disparagement agreement. They wanted to make sure I couldn't talk about anything related to the company. I refused to sign. They said I wouldn't get severance then. I said that was fine. I walked out of that office knowing exactly what had happened. Someone in the ethics office had reported my complaint to the CEO instead of investigating it. They decided I was a problem and gotten rid of me. I was furious, and now I had nothing to lose. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in whistleblower cases. I gave him everything I'd found. He said I had a solid case, but that these things take time and there were no guarantees. I also contacted a journalist at a local business publication. I gave her all my documentation about Future Foundation, the payments, the connections to the CEO. She investigated. 3 months later, she published a detailed article exposing the scheme. Future Foundation was indeed a fake charity. The CEO's brother-in-law was essentially being paid $600,000 a year through this setup. The charity did minimal actual charitable work, just enough to maintain nonprofit status. The article went viral in our local business community. Other media outlets picked it up. The state attorney general opened an investigation. The fallout was spectacular. The CEO was forced to resign. The board launched an internal investigation. They discovered that several other executives knew about the arrangement. Multiple people were fired. The company had to pay back millions in fraudulent tax deductions. They settled with the state for additional penalties. Their reputation was destroyed. As for me, I was unemployed for 8 months. Despite being proven right, having exposed legitimate fraud, I couldn't get hired. My former company had spread the word in the industry that I was a difficult employee who didn't respect confidentiality. The whistleblower retaliation was real, and it was brutal. Companies say they want ethical employees who speak up, but in reality, they blacklist you. I eventually found a job at a smaller company, but I took a significant pay cut. I had to relocate to a different city to escape the reputation my former company had given me. The lawyer said I could sue for wrongful termination and retaliation, but it would take years and cost a fortune with no guarantee of winning. I didn't have the resources or the energy for that fight. The CEO, he faced no criminal charges. He paid some fines, lost his job, but moved on to a consulting position somewhere else. His brother-in-law shut down Future Foundation and started a new consulting business. They both landed on their feet. Meanwhile, I'm still rebuilding my career and my finances. The morale of this story isn't satisfying. I did the right thing. I exposed fraud. I protected company resources and taxpayer money, and I paid a heavy price for it. Would I do it again? I honestly don't know. Part of me says yes, because it was the right thing to do. But another part of me remembers the 8 months of unemployment, the destroyed professional reputation, the stress and fear and anger. The system isn't designed to protect whistleblowers. It's designed to protect the people in power. If you find yourself in a similar situation, document everything, get a lawyer immediately, and understand that doing the right thing might cost you dearly. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. I hope things change. I hope companies actually start protecting people who speak up. But I'm not holding my breath. Let's move to the next story. I live in an apartment complex with assigned parking spaces. When I moved in, I was given space number 42, right near my building entrance. Perfect location. For the first 6 months, everything was fine. Then a new tenant moved into the building. Let's call him Brad. Brad drove a huge pickup truck, one of those unnecessarily large vehicles that guys buy to compensate for something. The truck barely fit in a standard parking space. Brad's assigned space was number 47, 5 spots down from mine. Apparently, Brad decided his truck was too nice to park in his assigned space because that space was under a tree, and he didn't want bird droppings on his precious truck. So Brad started parking in my space. The first time it happened, I figured it was an honest mistake. New tenant, maybe confused about the numbers. I left a polite note on his windshield. Hi, this is space 42. Your assigned space is 47. Thanks. The next day, he parked there again. No acknowledgement of my note. I knocked on his door. He answered, and I politely explained that he was parking in my space. He looked me up and down and said, Yeah, well, my space is under a tree. This one's better. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. He genuinely thought his preference was a valid reason to take my space. I explained that these spaces were assigned, that I paid for this specific space, and that he needed to use his own. He shrugged and said, Take it up with management then, and closed the door in my face. I did take it up with management. They sent him a warning letter. He ignored it. This went on for 2 weeks. Every day, I'd come home from work, and Brad's truck would be in my space. I'd have to park in guest parking, which was a 10-minute walk from my apartment. Management sent multiple letters. Brad didn't care. They threatened to tow his truck. He said he'd sue if they did. I was beyond frustrated. I was paying for a parking space I couldn't use because this guy decided the rules didn't apply to him. So I got creative. I couldn't have his truck towed from my space because management was too scared of the legal threat, but I could make parking in my space extremely inconvenient. Phase 1. I bought a bright orange traffic cone. Every morning before I left for work, I'd place it in my parking space. When I came home, if Brad had moved it and parked there anyway, I'd place the cone right behind his truck, as close as possible without touching it. Brad would have to get out of his truck and move the cone to leave. A minor inconvenience, but an inconvenience nonetheless. This annoyed him, but he kept parking there. Phase 2. I escalated. I bought a motion-activated sprinkler and set it up on the grassy area next to my parking space. I adjusted it so that anyone parking in my space would trigger the sprinkler when they got out of their vehicle. Brad got soaked the first time, and the second time, and the third time. He figured out the sprinkler was motion-activated and started trying to dodge it, which was hilarious to watch from my window. He complained to management. They said the sprinkler was for watering the grass, which it technically was, so there was nothing they could do. Phase 3. I made parking in my space socially uncomfortable. I recruited my neighbors. Every time Brad parked in my space, I'd text the group chat. My neighbors would come out and just stand there, watching him, not saying anything, just observing. Brad would pull in, see 5 or 6 neighbors standing around staring at his truck, and get visibly uncomfortable. But he still kept parking there, out of spite at this point. Phase 4. I went nuclear. I found out Brad worked from home most days. so I arranged to have various deliveries made to my apartment during the day, all requiring signature confirmation. Pizza delivery, flower delivery, packages, all addressed to me, all requiring someone to buzz my apartment. Since I wasn't home, the delivery people would buzz multiple apartments trying to find someone to sign. This created a constant stream of interruptions to Brad's workday. Delivery people buzzing, neighbors buzzing to complain about the delivery people. Complete chaos. After a week of this, Brad snapped. He came to my door, furious, demanding I stop having things delivered. I smiled sweetly and said, "I'll stop having things delivered when you stop parking in my space." He called me a bunch of names. I closed the door. The next day, his truck was in space 47, his actual assigned space, under the tree. I thought I'd won. But 3 days later, he was back in my space. So I continued the deliveries, and the sprinkler, and the cone, and the neighbor stare-downs. This went on for another month. It became a war of attrition. Who would break first? Finally, management decided they'd had enough of both of us. They called us both in for a meeting. They offered Brad a different parking space, one not under a tree, farther from the building. Brad, exhausted from the deliveries and the sprinkler and the psychological warfare, agreed. Problem solved. Except it wasn't really solved. I'd won, but at what cost? I'd spent 2 months of my life obsessed with parking space revenge. I'd spent money on cones and sprinklers and unnecessary deliveries. I'd turned my neighbors into accomplices in a weird surveillance operation. Was it worth it? Honestly, yes. Yes, it was, because Brad learned that he couldn't just take what he wanted because he felt entitled to it. He learned that actions have consequences, even if those consequences are petty and annoying. And I learned that I'm capable of sustained, creative pettiness when someone pushes me far enough. My parking space is sacred now. Nobody parks there except me. There's an unspoken understanding in the complex. Space 42 belongs to the person who waged psychological warfare over parking. I'm not proud of who I became during the Great Parking Space War, but I'm not ashamed either. Let's get into the next one. Family weddings are complicated. There are expectations, traditions, unspoken rules about who pays for what and who's responsible for making sure everything goes smoothly. My cousin Emma got engaged 2 years ago. We'd always been close growing up, more like sisters than cousins. I was thrilled for her and honored when she asked me to be a bridesmaid. Then the wedding planning began, and Emma transformed into someone I didn't recognize. It started small. She picked bridesmaids' dresses that cost $400 each. Expensive, but not completely unreasonable for a wedding. Then she planned a destination bachelorette party in Miami. Flight, hotel, activities, easily $1,500 per person. I was hesitant about the cost, but didn't want to be difficult. Several other bridesmaids expressed concern. Emma got upset, said we didn't care about her special day, that she'd always dreamed of a Miami bachelorette party. We all agreed to go. I put it on a credit card I really couldn't afford to use. The bachelorette party was fine, but expensive. Emma expected us to split all her costs since she was the bride. Meals, drinks, club entries, everything. What was supposed to cost $1,500 ended up being closer to $2,000. Then came the bridal shower. Emma wanted it at an upscale venue with catering, decorations, expensive favors for guests. As bridesmaids, we were expected to plan and pay for it. We split the cost 6 ways. My share was $500. At this point, I was in about $3,000 for someone else's wedding. My credit card was maxed. I was stressed about money constantly, but it got worse. A month before the wedding, Emma called me. She was crying. Apparently, some guests had canceled last minute, and the venue required payment for the guaranteed guest count. She was short about $6,000. She asked if I could loan her the money. She promised she'd pay me back after the wedding when she and her fiancé returned from their honeymoon. I said I didn't have $6,000. She asked if I could put it on a credit card. I explained I'd already maxed my card paying for bridesmaid expenses. She got quiet, then said, So you're saying no? I said I literally didn't have the money or the credit to help her. She said she'd figure it out and hung up. The next day, she called back. She talked to the other bridesmaids. They'd all agreed to chip in. If we each contributed $1,000, the wedding could go on as planned. I said again that I didn't have $1,000. She said I could borrow it from family or figure something out. She said she'd always been there for me and couldn't believe I wouldn't do this one thing for her. I felt guilty. I talked to my mom, who offered to loan me the money. I reluctantly agreed and sent Emma the $1,000. The wedding happened. It was beautiful. Emma looked happy. Everything went smoothly. After the honeymoon, I waited for Emma to reach out about paying me back. Weeks went by. Nothing. I finally texted her asking about it. She said money was tight after the wedding and honeymoon. Could I wait a few more months? I said okay, even though I needed to start paying my mom back. Months passed. I'd occasionally bring it up, and Emma would always have an excuse. They had unexpected expenses. Her husband's car needed repairs. They were saving for a house. A year after the wedding, I was still waiting for my money. At that point, I'd paid my mom back in installments, so I was out the full $1,000 myself. I brought it up more directly. I said I really needed the money back, that I'd gone into debt to help her. Emma got defensive. She said I was being selfish, that I should consider it a wedding gift. A wedding gift? I'd already given her an actual wedding gift from her registry, plus the bridesmaid dress, the bachelorette party, the bridal shower. I'd spent almost $5,000 on her wedding. I told her that wasn't the agreement. She'd promised to pay me back. She said promises change, and I needed to be more flexible. We had a huge fight. She accused me of caring more about money than our relationship. I said she'd taken advantage of me financially and was now refusing to honor her commitment. She stopped speaking to me. Other family members got involved. Some sided with me, saying Emma had been irresponsible and manipulative. Others sided with her, saying family should help family without expecting repayment. Emma and I haven't spoken in over a year. She's blocked me on social media. According to mutual family members, she tells people I ruined her wedding by making everything about money. The irony is painful. I never got my $1,000 back. I learned an expensive lesson about setting boundaries and not letting guilt override my financial common sense. If someone asks you to loan them money for a wedding, think very carefully, get it in writing, and be prepared for the possibility that the relationship won't survive the transaction. I miss my cousin. I miss the relationship we had. But I can't respect someone who manipulates people into financial hardship and then plays the victim when called out on it. Moving forward, if someone asks me to be a bridesmaid, I'm asking upfront about expected costs. And if those costs exceed what I can comfortably afford, I'm declining. My financial stability is more important than being in someone's wedding party, even if that someone is family. Let's get into the next story. I moved into a new apartment about 2 years ago. Ground floor unit, nice neighborhood, seemed perfect. My upstairs neighbor was a guy in his 50s, lived alone, kept to himself. We'd exchange polite hellos in the hallway, but never really talked. About 6 months after I moved in, I started noticing weird things. Small things that individually seemed meaningless, but collectively felt wrong. I'd mentioned to a coworker that I was thinking about buying a new coffee maker, and the next day, there would be a flyer for a coffee maker sale slipped under my door. I tell my friend on the phone that I was considering joining a gym, and suddenly my mailbox had gym membership promotions. At first, I thought it was coincidence. We all get random junk mail and flyers, but it kept happening with oddly specific timing. Then I started noticing that my neighbors seemed to know things about my schedule. He'd randomly run into me when I was leaving for work, coming home from the grocery store, going out on weekends. Always friendly, always casual, but the frequency felt weird. One night, I was home alone watching TV when I heard a sound from my ceiling. A faint creaking, like someone walking slowly, deliberately. I looked up and saw my ceiling light fixture swaying slightly. My upstairs neighbor was home. I could hear him moving around. But the sound wasn't normal footsteps. It was focused, concentrated in one area directly above where I was sitting. I got up and moved to a different room. The creaking followed me, always directly overhead, always stopping when I stopped. I felt crazy even thinking it, but it seemed like he was following my movements from upstairs. I decided to test this theory. I stayed very quiet, didn't turn on any lights, and waited. After about 10 minutes, I heard footsteps moving toward the front of his apartment, then silence. I quickly walked to my bedroom in the back. Within 30 seconds, I heard footsteps above me moving to the back of his apartment. He was tracking where I was in my apartment. I was genuinely scared now. I called my friend and explained what was happening. She said I should call the police. But what would I tell them? My neighbor walks around his apartment. That's not illegal. I decided to document everything. I started noting times when I heard the following footsteps, times when he coincidentally ran into me, times when I received suspiciously targeted mail or flyers. Then I made a discovery that changed everything. I was replacing a light bulb in my bedroom when I noticed something odd about the smoke detector. It looked newer than the other smoke detectors in my apartment, and it had a tiny LED light that I'd never noticed before. I'm not a tech expert, but something felt wrong. I took a photo and sent it to my friend who works in IT security. She called me immediately. That wasn't a standard smoke detector. The LED light and the model number she found online indicated it was a camera. Someone had installed a camera in my bedroom disguised as a smoke detector. I felt sick. Someone had been watching me in my bedroom for months. I checked every smoke detector in my apartment. 3 of them were cameras. Bedroom, bathroom, living room. My entire apartment was under surveillance. I called the police. They came immediately. They confirmed the devices were cameras, documented everything, and helped me remove them. They asked if I knew who might have installed them. I told them about my neighbor, his odd behavior, the tracking, the coincidences. They went upstairs to question him. I waited in my apartment with a police officer. After about 20 minutes, the other officers came back. They'd found equipment in my neighbor's apartment, monitors showing feeds from the cameras in my unit, recording devices, logs of my movements and activities. He'd been watching me for 6 months, recording me. He had footage of me changing clothes, showering, sleeping, everything. They arrested him immediately. He didn't resist. Apparently, he just kept saying he wasn't hurting anyone. He was just observing. The legal process was a nightmare. I had to give statements, testify, relive the violation over and over. My neighbor was charged with voyeurism, illegal surveillance, stalking. He pleaded guilty and got 2 years in prison. 2 years. For 6 months of systematically invading my privacy and recording my most intimate moments. The judge also issued a restraining order. But honestly, what good is that? When he gets out, what's stopping him from doing this to someone else? I moved out of that apartment immediately. I couldn't stay there knowing what had happened. Every room felt contaminated. I check every smoke detector, every vent, every electrical outlet, paranoid about hidden cameras. I still do that in my new place. I bought camera detectors. I check my apartment regularly. I'm hyper aware of my neighbor's behavior in ways that aren't healthy. The worst part is the footage. My lawyer said the police seized all the recordings as evidence, and they'd be destroyed after the trial. But I don't know if that's actually true. I don't know if copies exist somewhere. The thought that someone might have videos of me in my most private moments, and I have no control over where those videos are, or who might see them, haunts me. I've been in therapy for over a year. My therapist says I have PTSD from the experience. I have nightmares about being watched. I can't relax in my own home. I've installed multiple locks, security cameras, alarm systems. I check everything compulsively. My friends and family try to be supportive, but I don't think they fully understand. This wasn't just a violation of privacy. This was someone systematically observing me, collecting information about my life, recording my intimate moments for months. While I had no idea, I filed a civil lawsuit against him. My lawyer says we'll likely win, but he has no assets. I'll probably never see any compensation for what he put me through. The apartment complex settled out of court. They paid for my moving expenses and gave me a modest settlement in exchange for not publicly blaming them for the security failure. It wasn't enough, but I didn't have the energy to fight them too. I'm sharing this story because I want people to know this happens. Hidden cameras are cheap and easily disguised. People who seem normal, quiet, harmless, can be doing terrible things behind closed doors. Check your smoke detectors. Check your vents. Check anything in your home that has a small hole or a LED light. Buy a camera detector if you can afford one. Be aware of your neighbor's behavior. Trust your instincts when something feels off. I ignored the red flags because I didn't want to seem paranoid or dramatic. I wish I'd trusted myself sooner. If you're in a similar situation, document everything and call the police. Even if it seems like nothing, even if you feel crazy, report it. Better to be wrong about suspicious behavior than to ignore actual surveillance. I'm still recovering. I'm still anxious and hypervigilant, but I'm also more aware, more cautious, and more willing to trust my instincts. That's something, at least. Let's move on to the next story. I worked at a small marketing agency, about 15 employees total. It was my first job out of college, and I was excited to be there. The work was interesting, the team seemed cool, and my boss, the owner of the agency, had a reputation for being innovative and forward-thinking. That reputation was a lie. My first few months were fine. Normal workload, reasonable hours, decent pay. Then one of our major clients launched a huge campaign with an impossible deadline. My boss called an all-hands meeting. He explained the situation. We had 3 weeks to deliver work that normally took 8 weeks. We'd need to work nights and weekends. But here's the thing, he said with a smile. We were all salaried employees, so there wouldn't be any overtime pay. He framed it as an opportunity to prove ourselves, to show our dedication to the agency. I was 23 and naive. I agreed, along with everyone else. Those 3 weeks were brutal. 14-hour days, 7 days a week. I barely slept. I ate takeout at my desk. I canceled plans with friends and family. My entire life became this project. We delivered on time. The client was thrilled. My boss threw a pizza party to celebrate. Pizza. After 3 weeks of grueling unpaid overtime, we got pizza. I thought it was over. It wasn't. The next month, another impossible deadline. Another expectation of unpaid nights and weekends. My boss started framing it as, that's just how the industry works, and we're building something special here. This became the norm. Every project had an unrealistic timeline. We were constantly working 60 to 70-hour weeks, and because we were salaried, we never saw an extra dollar. I started doing math. My salary broke down to about $25 an hour if I worked a standard 40-hour week, but with the actual hours I was working, it was closer to $14 an hour. I was making less than minimum wage in many states. I brought this up to my boss during my 6-month review. He said I was missing the big picture. This was an investment in my future. The experience I was gaining was worth more than money. I asked about compensatory time off for the extra hours. He said we were a small agency. We couldn't afford to have people taking random days off. I asked about bonuses or profit sharing since we were generating so much revenue from all this work. He said the agency was still in growth mode. Profits were being reinvested. I looked around at my coworkers. Everyone looked exhausted. Several people had developed health issues. One guy was on medication for stress-induced high blood pressure. Another woman had started seeing a therapist for burnout. But nobody was pushing back. Everyone just accepted this as normal. Then I found out why. I was talking to a coworker who'd been there for 3 years. I asked her why she stayed despite the conditions. She said she couldn't afford to quit. She had student loans, rent, bills, and our boss had made it clear that if anyone left, he wouldn't give them a positive reference. He was essentially holding people's careers hostage. Work yourself to death, or risk not being able to find another job in the industry. I decided to do some research. I looked up labor laws. Turns out, just calling someone salaried doesn't automatically exempt them from overtime pay. There are specific criteria about job duties and decision-making authority. Most of us didn't meet those criteria. We were doing standard marketing work, following instructions from clients and senior management. We should have been classified as non-exempt employees, entitled to overtime pay. I brought this information to my coworkers. We had a meeting outside of work. I showed them the labor law documentation. We calculated how much unpaid overtime we'd collectively worked. The numbers were staggering. In 1 year, the agency had effectively stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid wages from employees. We decided to file a complaint with the Department of Labor, all of us together, with documentation of our actual hours worked. Our boss found out. I don't know how, but he did. He called each of us into his office individually. He was furious. He accused us of being ungrateful, disloyal, short-sighted. He said if we pursued this complaint, he'd make sure none of us ever worked in marketing again. Several coworkers backed out, scared of his threats. But 5 of us, including me, moved forward. The Department of Labor investigation took months. They reviewed our timesheets, our projects, our job descriptions. They interviewed us and our boss. Their conclusion, we had been misclassified. We should have been non-exempt employees. The agency owed us back pay for all the overtime we'd worked. The total amount, including penalties, was over $300,000. Our boss tried to fight it. He hired lawyers, claimed we were lying about our hours, said we were trying to destroy the business. But the evidence was clear. We had emails timestamped at 2 a.m. We had project files showing we were working weekends. We had everything documented. He lost. The agency was ordered to pay the back wages. Instead of paying, he shut down the agency. He filed for bankruptcy, dissolved the business, and walked away. We never saw a dollar of the money we were owed. He started a new agency 6 months later under a different name. He's still in business, probably still exploiting young workers who don't know their rights. The 5 of us who filed the complaint are all blacklisted in the local marketing scene. He spread rumors that we were difficult employees, that we'd sabotaged the agency, that we weren't trustworthy. Despite winning our labor complaint, despite being objectively in the right, our careers in that city were over. I had to move to a different state to find work. I took a lower-paying job and had to start rebuilding my reputation from scratch. The lesson I learned: knowing your rights doesn't always protect you. Sometimes the system fails you even when you win. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. Would I do it again? I honestly don't know. Part of me is proud that I stood up for myself and my coworkers. Part of me wishes I'd just quietly found a new job and moved on without rocking the boat. But I do know this. If you're working somewhere that's systematically exploiting you, document everything. Know your rights. And understand that fighting back might cost you more than you expect. The system isn't designed to protect workers. It's designed to protect businesses. That's a hard truth I learned at 23. Let's get into the next one. This one is embarrassing because it's so trivial, but it completely destroyed a friend group I'd been part of for 7 years. We were a group of 6 people who met in college and stayed close after graduation. We'd hang out every weekend, do game nights, take trips together, genuinely enjoyed each other's company. One of our favorite activities was board game night. We'd rotate whose house we'd go to, try new games, eat too much junk food, and just have fun. It was wholesome and predictable and comfortable. Then someone brought Monopoly. I know. Monopoly has a reputation for ruining friendships. We joked about it. We thought we were above it. We were wrong. The game started normally. Everyone picked their pieces, we distributed the money, started going around the board. Harmless. About an hour in, tension started rising. One of our friends, let's call him Mike, was winning. He owned most of the good properties and was systematically bankrupting everyone else. Another friend, Sarah, landed on one of Mike's properties and couldn't pay the rent. She asked if she could pay him back later. Mike said no, those weren't the rules. Sarah said it was just a game, he should be flexible. Mike said if we weren't going to play by the rules, there was no point playing. They started arguing about Monopoly. 2 30-year-old adults yelling at each other about fake real estate in a board game. The rest of us tried to mediate. We suggested Sarah could mortgage her properties to pay Mike. She said that would leave her with nothing, and Mike was already so far ahead it didn't matter. Mike said that wasn't his problem. She made bad strategic choices and now had to face the consequences. It escalated. Sarah accused Mike of being ruthless and caring more about winning than about friends having fun. Mike accused Sarah of being a sore loser who couldn't handle competition. Another friend, Jason, jumped in defending Sarah. He said Mike was taking the game too seriously and sucking the fun out of the evening. Mike's girlfriend, also in the group, defended Mike. She said Sarah was being entitled and expecting special treatment. Suddenly, we weren't arguing about Monopoly anymore. We were arguing about personality traits, past grievances, who was a good friend and who wasn't. Someone brought up a time Mike had been competitive during a work softball game. Someone else mentioned that Sarah always expected people to accommodate her. Old resentment surfaced. The game was abandoned. Sarah left crying. Mike left angry. The rest of us sat there in shocked silence, wondering what had just happened. We tried to recover. Multiple group texts, attempts to smooth things over, apologies, but the damage was done. Sarah refused to be in the same room as Mike. Mike said he didn't want to be friends with people who couldn't respect rules and boundaries. The group split. Some people sided with Sarah, saying Mike had been unreasonably rigid. Others sided with Mike, saying Sarah had been overly dramatic. A few of us tried to stay neutral, which just made both sides angry at us. Within a month, the friend group had completely dissolved. 7 years of friendship destroyed by a single game of Monopoly. The worst part is how stupid it all was. Nobody really cared about the game. The game just brought out underlying tensions that had been building for years. Mike's competitiveness had always been an issue. Sarah's tendency to expect special treatment had always been there. We'd all just been ignoring these things to keep the peace. Monopoly didn't ruin our friendship. It just exposed that the friendship was already damaged. I'm still in touch with a couple people from that group, but it's not the same. We don't do game nights. We barely hang out. The easy closeness we used to have is gone. I miss it. I miss having a consistent friend group, regular hangouts, that sense of belonging. But I also recognize that maybe that friend group wasn't as solid as I thought it was. Real friendships can handle disagreements. They can survive conflicts. If a board game destroyed our group, it was never as strong as we pretended it was. Still, I haven't played Monopoly since, and I probably never will again. Some games aren't worth the risk. All right, let's dive into the next story. I'm not a therapist. I don't have training in psychology or counseling. I'm just a regular person who works in an office doing regular office things. But somehow, I became the person everyone came to with their problems. It started innocently enough. A coworker was having a bad day and vented to me in the break room. I listened, offered some sympathetic comments, and thought nothing of it. Then it happened again. Different coworker, different problem. Then another, and another. Within a few months, I was having multiple impromptu therapy sessions per week. People would stop by my desk, close the door to the conference room, or pull me aside in the hallway to talk about their issues. Work problems, relationship drama, family conflicts, personal insecurities. I heard it all, and I couldn't figure out how to make it stop without seeming like a terrible person. The thing is, I'm naturally empathetic. I'm a good listener. I don't judge. These are apparently rare qualities in a corporate environment, so people latched onto me as their emotional support coworker. But it was exhausting. I'd come to work planning to focus on my projects, and instead, I'd spend 3 hours listening to someone's marriage problems, or their conflict with their teenage daughter, or their anxiety about a performance review. My own work started suffering. I was missing deadlines because I was too busy being everyone else's therapist. My manager noticed and asked what was going on. I didn't know how to explain that I was drowning in other people's emotional needs. I tried setting boundaries. I'd say things like, "I'm really busy right now. Can we talk later?" But people would look so hurt and disappointed that I'd cave and listen anyway. One coworker in particular let's call her Linda, became especially dependent on these sessions. She'd stop by my desk multiple times a day. She'd text me after work hours. She'd call me on weekends. She was going through a divorce and genuinely struggling, so I felt guilty about limiting her access to me. But it reached a point where I was spending more time managing Linda's emotional crisis than doing my actual job. Then things got weird. Linda started treating me like her actual therapist. She'd ask me what she should do about specific situations. She'd make decisions based on my casual comments. She'd reference things I'd said in previous conversations like they were professional therapeutic advice. I panicked and clarified that I wasn't qualified to give that kind of guidance, that she should probably see an actual therapist. She got upset and said I was abandoning her when she needed me most. Other coworkers started getting jealous. Someone complained to HR that I was spending too much time in closed-door conversations with certain people. HR called me in for a meeting. They asked if I was having inappropriate relationships with coworkers. I explained I was just listening to people's problems, being supportive. They said that was admirable, but I needed to be careful about boundaries and the appearance of favoritism. I realized this whole situation had spiraled out of control. I'd accidentally created a dynamic where I was responsible for everyone's emotional well-being, and it was destroying both my productivity and my mental health. I decided to make a clean break. I sent an email to the people who regularly came to me with problems. I explained that while I cared about them, I was not a qualified therapist and needed to focus on my work responsibilities. I encouraged them to seek professional support if they were struggling. The responses varied. Some people were understanding, others were hurt and angry. Linda sent me a long message about how I'd betrayed her trust, and she thought we were real friends. That stung. Were we friends? I didn't know anymore. Our entire relationship had been her sharing problems and me listening. We'd never just hung out, never talked about anything that wasn't related to her personal crisis. The office dynamic changed. People who used to be warm and friendly became cold. I was suddenly excluded from lunch groups and happy hour invitations. I'd become the person who rejected people in their time of need. My manager pulled me aside and said several people had mentioned I'd been mean to them. I explained the situation, how I'd been overwhelmed by playing therapist to half the office. She was sympathetic, but said I needed to find a way to be supportive without being dismissive. I felt trapped. If I listened to people's problems, I couldn't do my job. If I didn't listen, I was labeled mean and unsupportive. There was no winning. Eventually, things settled. People found other outlets for their emotional needs. Linda actually did start seeing a therapist, which was genuinely good for her. A few coworkers apologized for putting too much on me, but the experience taught me important lessons about boundaries. Being kind and empathetic is good, but you can't sacrifice your own well-being and responsibilities to manage everyone else's emotions. It's okay to say no. It's okay to redirect people to appropriate resources. It's okay to prioritize your own mental health and work obligations. I'm still a good listener. I still care about my coworkers, but now I have clear boundaries. I'll listen for a few minutes, offer sympathy, and then gently suggest they talk to HR, a manager, or a professional if the issue is serious. Some people still think I'm cold because of this, but I'd rather be seen as cold than burn out trying to be everyone's unpaid, unqualified therapist. Your mental health matters. Your time matters. You can't pour from an empty cup. And if you're someone who relies on a coworker for emotional support, please consider whether you're asking too much. Your coworker is not your therapist. They have their own job, their own stress, their own life. Find appropriate support. Set appropriate boundaries. Respect that other people have limits. That's the lesson I learned the hard way. Let's move on to the next one. I had a roommate situation that started out great and devolved into one of the most frustrating living experiences of my life. My roommate, let's call him Tom, and I found an apartment together. 2 bedrooms, split rent, and utilities 50-50, standard roommate arrangement. We'd known each other from work and got along well enough to live together. The first few months were fine. We had different schedules, stayed out of each other's way, kept the common areas clean. Perfect roommate situation. Then Tom started dating someone, Let's call her Rachel. At first, Rachel was over occasionally, a couple nights a week, totally normal. But gradually, she started staying over more often. 3 nights a week became 4. 4 became 5. Then she was there every night. I didn't say anything at first because I didn't want to be the uptight roommate who had rules about guests. But Rachel wasn't just staying over, she was living there. She had clothes in Tom's closet. Her toiletries were in the bathroom. She cooked meals in our kitchen. She did laundry in our apartment. She was there when I woke up and there when I went to bed. Our utility bills started going up. Water, electricity, internet usage. We were still splitting everything 50-50, but now there were effectively 3 people living in the apartment. Rachel also had no sense of boundaries. She'd use my dishes without asking. She'd finish food I'd bought without replacing it. She'd leave her stuff all over the common areas. I tried to hint to Tom that Rachel was around a lot. He'd agree cheerfully and say, "Yeah, she practically lives here. Isn't it great?" "No, Tom, it's not great. I signed up to live with 1 roommate, not 2. I finally had a direct conversation with him. I explained that Rachel was essentially living with us and not contributing to rent or utilities. Tom said she still had her own apartment. She was just staying with him most of the time. I asked if she was paying rent there. He said no. She'd been planning to break her lease because she was here so much anyway. So she was going to officially move in without discussing it with me, the other person paying rent. Tom seemed surprised by my reaction. He said it wasn't a big deal. Rachel would still just be his guest. She wouldn't officially be on the lease. I explained that if someone is living somewhere full-time, they're not a guest, they're a tenant, and they should contribute financially. Tom got defensive. He said I was being unreasonable, that couples stay over at each other's places, that I was trying to control his relationship. I said I wasn't trying to control his relationship. I was trying to maintain a fair living arrangement. If Rachel was going to live there, she should pay 1/3 of the rent and utilities. Tom refused. He said she was his guest, and guests don't pay rent. I pointed out that a guest is someone who visits temporarily, not someone who lives there permanently. We were at an impasse. Tom wouldn't ask Rachel to contribute financially. I wasn't willing to subsidize her living expenses. I started documenting everything. Rachel's car in the parking spot every night. Her mail being delivered to our apartment. Her using facilities and resources. I built a case. Then, I went to our landlord. I explained the situation and asked if having a 3rd person living in a 2-person apartment was a lease violation. The landlord reviewed our lease. Technically, guests were allowed for up to 14 consecutive days. After that, they were considered an unauthorized occupant, and both Tom and I could be evicted. The landlord sent Tom a warning letter. Either Rachel needed to leave, or she needed to be added to the lease and pay her share of rent. Tom was furious. He accused me of going behind his back, of trying to break up his relationship, of being a terrible friend and roommate. I said I tried to resolve it directly with him multiple times, and he'd refused to compromise. I didn't see another option. Rachel and Tom argued about it. She didn't want to pay rent because she was just staying with her boyfriend. Tom couldn't afford to cover her share on his own. They finally agreed she'd pay 1/3 of utilities but not rent, since she wasn't on the lease. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. But the damage to my relationship with Tom was done. He was cold and hostile. Rachel was even worse. They'd make passive-aggressive comments, have loud conversations about how unreasonable I was, make me feel unwelcome in my own apartment. I started spending more time in my room, avoiding common areas. The apartment felt hostile and uncomfortable. When our lease was up, I moved out. Tom and Rachel stayed and got a new roommate. According to mutual friends, they pulled the same thing with the new roommate. Rachel essentially moved in without contributing, and the new roommate also ended up moving out. Some people told me I should have just let it go, that it wasn't worth the conflict. But I fundamentally disagreed with subsidizing someone else's living expenses without my consent. If you're in a roommate situation and your roommate's partner is essentially living with you, address it early. Don't let it build up. Have clear conversations about expectations and financial responsibilities. And if you're the person whose partner is always at your shared apartment, have some self-awareness. You're imposing on your roommate. Either your partner should contribute financially or they should split time between both apartments. Living situations require mutual respect and fairness. Tom and Rachel had neither. I'm glad I moved out. I now live alone and will never have roommates again if I can help it. The peace of mind is worth the extra rent. Let's get into the next one. I work in a small team of 5 people. We're all dependent on each other to keep projects moving, so when someone is absent, it affects everyone. One of my co-workers, let's call her Jessica, started calling in sick frequently. Once or twice a month at first, which seemed reasonable. Everyone gets sick sometimes. But it escalated. She was calling in sick once a week, sometimes twice. Always on Mondays or Fridays, which was suspicious but not conclusive proof of anything. The rest of us had to pick up her work when she was out. We were already busy, and covering for someone else meant working longer hours, postponing our own projects, and generally being stressed and overworked. Our manager was sympathetic to Jessica. She said Jessica had some ongoing health issues, and we needed to be understanding and supportive. So we were. We didn't complain. We covered her work. We sent supportive messages hoping she felt better. This went on for 4 months. 4 months of frequent absences. 4 months of the rest of us struggling to keep up with the extra workload. Then I saw something on Instagram that made me furious. Jessica had posted photos from a concert, a weekday concert. One of the days she'd called in sick. I scrolled through her Instagram. More photos. Her at brunch with friends on a day she'd been too sick to work. Her on a hiking trip during a week where she'd called in sick twice. Her at a beach on a Friday she'd taken as a sick day. She wasn't sick. She was just using sick days to do fun things. I was livid. We'd been killing ourselves to cover for her, genuinely concerned about her health, and she'd been lying the whole time. I showed the photos to another coworker. She was equally angry. We debated what to do. On one hand, maybe Jessica had a chronic condition where she had good days and bad days. Maybe these photos were from the good days, and we were jumping to conclusions. On the other hand, that seemed unlikely given the frequency and the timing of her absences. We decided to bring it to our manager. We showed her the Instagram evidence. She said she'd look into it. A week later, our manager called Jessica into a meeting. I don't know exactly what was said, but Jessica came out looking pale and shaken. Her sick days stopped immediately. She came to work every day for the next 2 months without a single absence. Then she put in her 2 weeks' notice. She said she'd found a new opportunity and was moving on. After she left, our manager told us the truth. Jessica had been faking most of her sick days. She'd had a legitimate medical issue early on, but that had resolved months ago. She just kept calling in sick because she could, and our manager had been too conflict avoidant to confront her about it. When presented with the Instagram evidence, Jessica had admitted it. She said she was burned out and needed mental health days, but didn't think she could ask for those directly, so she pretended to be physically sick instead. Our manager should have addressed this sooner. The policy should have required doctor's notes after a certain number of sick days. There should have been accountability. But there wasn't, and the rest of us suffered for months because of Jessica's dishonesty and our manager's failure to manage. The frustrating part is that if Jessica had been honest about needing mental health days, we probably would have been understanding. Our company actually had a good mental health policy. She could have taken personal days or talked to HR about accommodations. But instead, she lied. She made us think she was dealing with serious health issues. She let us worry about her while she was out having fun. That betrayal of trust is what made it unforgivable. After Jessica left, our manager implemented new policies. Sick days required documentation after 3 absences in a month. We had regular check-ins about workload and burnout. The changes should have happened sooner, but at least they happened. I learned some lessons from this experience. People aren't always what they seem. Sometimes someone's personal crisis is just them taking advantage of goodwill, and managers need to actually manage instead of avoiding difficult conversations. If you're a manager, and you have an employee with suspicious absence patterns, investigate. Don't just accept whatever story you're told. It's not kind to the employee who's lying, and it's definitely not fair to the team members picking up the slack. And if you're an employee who needs time off, be honest about it. Don't fake illness. Don't make your coworkers carry your workload under false pretenses. There are legitimate ways to get the time you need. Use them. Lying helps no one and damages trust that's hard to rebuild. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.